This is Geoff Arbuckle.
This is Jason Oliver.
And Jason, do you know what it is that people can catch every Wednesday, each and every week?
It's not another stupid movie podcast, is it?
It's exactly another stupid movie podcast.
Oh, shoot!
You can listen to new episodes of Film Seizure every Wednesday morning starring me.
And me!
And we just sit around and talk about movies. Sometimes they're good movies. Sometimes they're bad movies. Sometimes they're someplace in between. I don't know.
Gross, ugly, delicious, funny.
All those things.
All those things.
So every Wednesday, go to filmseizure.com. You might be there right now listening to this episode that's about to start. But you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Film Seizure. So let's get started with a new episode.
Enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Film Seizure. I'm Jason Oliver.
I am Geoff Arbuckle.
And today we have for you a bit of a new sort of concept. We are talking about two movies that are very much entwined, but yet
Separate, very different.
Very different, but yet made 30 years apart.
Yeah, and what I mean by different is they are separate, but a continuation of one another.
Yes.
They are, we've got our Blade Runner original.
Which is, we're referring to as Blade Runner 2019, maybe?
Sure. Yeah, even though it was made in 82. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're thinking ahead
Yeah.
to next year.
Sure.
And then we've got...
Because everything's going to be exactly like it
Yes.
was in Blade Runner.
I'm going to have a
next year.
flying car. It's going to be rad. I'm going to be able to walk out my apartment right up to the street and get me some Chinese food. It's going to be great.
It's going to like hover right in front of me.
Yep,
and
it's
I'm
going to be
eat
fantastic.
My noodles. And then we're going to talk about Blade Runner 2049, which just came out last year.
Yes.
And how they kind of interplay and work
exactly.
together.
And, you know, we're real cognizant of the fact that over the last couple of years, Blade Runner has been dissected quite a bit. But I don't think we're going to talk about all the same things, because I think we both have very nostalgic and very very deep connections to this movie. This is real sci-fi. This is not like Star Wars or Star Trek, where it's sci-fi wrapped around an action or adventure. So this is real sci-fi.
Yeah, this is a kind of an even day in the life kind of sci-fi, right? Where
it's the world building type.
Yeah, which if you know Geoff and I, we like world building. We like it a lot.
Yes. So Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, was based on a Philip K. Dick novel from, I think, 1968.
Sure.
Called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Which is the easiest title to ever spurt out.
Absolutely rolls right off the tongue.
Right off the tongue. And it is but the first Blade Runner, keep in mind, is very loosely based on that.
Yes.
I would say that 2049 actually explores more of the stuff that makes up that novel a little bit better than the original. But we'll talk about that.
Yep, sure.
You know, Jason, you were talking a little bit before we started recording about, I think, the general mood of finding out that there was a sequel being made.
Oh, yes. So, you know, all right. Geoff and I, most people who like Blade Runner really like Blade Runner. I mean, it is one of our, I would admit, probably my favorite movies ever made.
I would say it is the best science fiction movie ever put to film.
Okay. Wow.
Again, thinking of what true science fiction is.
Okay.
I mean, because, yes, obviously Empire Strikes Back, Star Trek 2 was racist.
Well, I think of things like 2001: A Space Odyssey,
sure,
or Alien, or, you know, I mean,
sure,
where Alien maybe could be argued as more of a gothic horror film.
Let me restate that. Not best, my favorite.
Okay.
Science fiction ever put to film. Because, yes, 2001 is a whole nother mind-altering experience.
But all right, but this all of this lends to the idea and the concern that we would have when we hear about a sequel. They're going to make a sequel to Blade Runner. Really?
Yeah.
How is this going to work?
Especially in today's pop culture, it's
There's also
a little worry.
What I didn't even talk about before we started recording was the fact that it's even more muddied by the fact that there are differing versions of Blade Runner and differing concepts of the ending of Blade Runner. So how do you fucking make a sequel, right?
Right.
So yes, there's trepidation, apprehension at the idea of this whole thing even happening. But you start to get a little bit more comfortable with the idea when you hear that Denis Villeneuve is directing it. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I'll give it my best shot.
That's how I would pronounce it. I mean, which is obviously going to be the right way.
I mean, Villeneuve has given us films like Arrival and
that's so good.
An Enemy and a few others that I'm not thinking of that I really like. He's Prisoners. He's a really, 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 really good director.
He works well with the science fiction genre.
Yes, and I mean, Arrival is.
Yeah.
I mean, that I think in the long term we'll go into the pantheon of great sci-fi films.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that's something that maybe Arrival is one we should talk about at some point in the near future.
I think we should. So and then you start hearing about some other things like Villeneuve really likes to work with composer Johan Johansson, so he brought him on board for the score, and I'm a huge fan of his work, and I thought, oh, that's going to be perfect, and that didn't quite pan out. We'll talk about that just briefly later, but you kind of start to see this pedigree build. And you hear Harrison Ford say things like, it's the best script he's ever read. And you hear that Ridley Scott is involved but not directing, which is super important.
Yes. Yeah. Because, boy, that is a hit and miss if you bring him in. Yeah.
So you start to kind of feel like, maybe they actually have a good idea here. And I started to get pretty excited about the idea of the sequel.
Yeah. And, you start seeing the visuals from the trailers that start coming, and you just realize that whatever decisions are being made are the right decisions.
Yeah, the first trailer was very important because it sounded like Blade Runner, it looked like Blade Runner, it gave me the same kind of vibes that watching the original Blade Runner gives me even to this day, and I was like, yep, okay, I'm on board.
Yep, let's do this.
It might still fail spectacularly, but it will be a spectacular failure.
Well,
not an raging one.
Right. Yeah.
We probably want to start really. I mean, that's our preface to the episode. We really want to start digging into the first Blade Runner, maybe our own personal affinity and where that comes from.
Yeah, I don't think there's any need for us to go beat by beat through Blade Runner 1. It's a pretty simplistic story.
Yep.
Pretty straightforward. You got Deckard, who is Harrison Ford. He is what's called a Blade Runner, not a term ever used by Philip K. Dick. Right. Which is a bounty hunter to track down things that are called replicants. Mm-hmm. Replicants are androids. I mean, they are meant to look and react like humans, but they are used for slave labor.
Right. They have a physical strength beyond that of a human,
so that they can do things that humans don't have to do or have to have machinery to do.
And there is this is, I think, important. There is the Nexus 6 model is the first model to actually be given human dream-like qualities.
Basically a consciousness.
Right. So from that foundation of dreams and memory, more specifically, the android believes that it is
it's a person.
That it is a person. Yeah, and that it has the experiences of a human being.
Right. Like the Rutger Hauer character is meant to be seemingly about a 30-year-old male who has 30 years of memories.
And as Pris says, I think, therefore I am. Right.
Exactly.
So, yeah, they have this awareness of consciousness. Yeah.
Right. And basically, they have a 4-year lifespan. They are to report and basically be decommissioned.
Right.
If they don't, Blade Runners are sent out after them to basically kill them, to retire them forcefully. Is basically the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
And that's what Harrison Ford is.
Or was.
He begins the movie retired.
Right.
But gets kind of strong-armed back into it. He meets a replicant by the name of Rachel,
yes,
played by Sean Young, who he grows empathy for through feeling sorry for these things that are giving false memories, that are somebody else's memories, and ultimately falls in love with her. And has a real change of heart about what these new life forms are, and,
yes,
and what they strive to have. It is, the original movie is very based on film noir.
yes,
and it's a detective story, really.
It is. You know what? It's funny. It's more tech noir than Terminator.
Yeah.
So Terminator's got the club tech noir, which I always love because it's such a great descriptor.
Well, and it's nodding to itself that this is what this movie
but
is.
It is, you know, most people call this cyberpunk. This is maybe the first cyberpunk movie. There may be something someone will dig up that contradicts that, but it feels to me like what truly put that cyberpunk aesthetic.
Yeah, because it's Roy
film.
Batty.
Yeah,
it's the Rutger Hauer character that brings that to life.
And I guess in a lot of ways, it's pretty inspired not just by the Philip K. Dick, but probably by Neuromancer, the novel, which is probably the first cyberpunk novel, if you will. But anyway, it's got all of this sort of aesthetic that has grown into its own subculture.
Yes,
in comics and film, in music, in literature. I mean, it is
absolutely inspiring to a lot of young filmmakers in the 80s.
Yeah.
The most direct and obvious inspiration is to The Fifth Element.
Oh, sure, yeah.
With the cityscape being, instead of it being urban sprawl outwards, they build up.
Yep. Which has been done in a lot of things, like the Dread comics and the movie. The only good movie. I'm not talking about the Stallone one.
The Stallone one that borrows that
Mega
idea
City
too.
1 is very much built on that idea.
Yes.
Yep.
It's building on top of instead of outwards.
Yes.
And the idea is that the closer you get to ground, the dirtier and grosser and everything, seedier it becomes.
Yeah.
To the point where anytime somebody's walking around on the street, it's just a fucking mass of people. It's huddled in cold, in rain,
and even beyond that, the idea of an off-world.
Yes,
like the off-world is where civilization is really thriving.
Well, it's like Elysium.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
It's the idea of, if you can get off-world awaits where all of your dreams come true.
Right.
Basically.
So basically, like the American dream, if you will, is like this off-world dream.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing is that in 1982, they make this movie that only takes place like 37 years later, where not only have we built 6 different versions of an android, but we're not just on Mars, but we are beyond our solar system.
Yeah.
You know, like and encountering other beings. If we take into consideration Rutger Hauer's Tears in the Rain speech, where
absolutely.
he attack ships off the arm of Orion, or off the shoulder of Orion.
Yeah.
They are in other stars. So we have progressed real fast.
Yep.
And that is real central in the idea of science fiction, that you build a world that, even though 37 years is not enough time to do those types of things, you still make it realistic, and it's textile or tactile is what I mean. It's a tactile idea that maybe in 2019 we are going to other planets and colonizing
there's
them.
enough that's rooted in reality that you feel like it is a genuine future. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it probably helps that all of the off-world stuff is just periphery.
Mm-hmm.
You're not actually spending time on this other planet. Like
That's
another
one of my
good,
favorite parts about these movies.
Yeah.
Is even the second one, they don't really explore off-world.
No.
And that was one of my big concerns going in, was like, all right, is this going to be like an off-world Blade Runner? Like, how are they going to do this? Because in my mind, 30 years later, from the world we live in Blade Runner, the first movie can't be that good.
And it isn't.
And it isn't. And it's very bleak and dark and stark. And I was really happy that they grounded the movie there.
Yes. Now, another, which I would almost say is kind of falls into that true sci-fi. Pitch Black takes place off-world.
Yes.
And it feels like a very realistic idea of what future is, and living in this world that is tactile. It's very realistic, and it's using things that are very realistic. Not everything is as pristine as Star Trek, and sometimes your job is like the song Rocket Man. Your job 5 days a week is out in fucking space.
Yeah.
It's
right.
I mean, that's your job, I mean, that makes things very real. So yes, off-world is some concept that you just don't have. It's just, you're not given that, but it's there.
And then there's, I know we're talking about Blade Runner, but I want to talk just briefly about Duncan Jones's Moon, where it takes the idea of off-world and it thinks, okay, in this world of Blade Runner, we're all of a sudden off the shoulder of Orion, right? But what was the first off-world movement? And it was the moon, right? And we still had synthetic androids then, like early generation maybe, and they're on the moon doing slave labor essentially, and they're not even aware of the fact of what they are. They think they're human.
They are an appliance.
Yeah. So which I love. I love that the idea of, all right, let's take a movie that's a thematical prequel, I guess, to Blade Runner, and that idea was brought to me by Shannon Mullins. Want to give him full credit. I didn't even think of it in that context until he said it, but it's absolutely true. You have this movie like Moon that says, all right, again, talking about inspiration from Blade Runner, there's a filmmaker who took a very small window of time in the future, maybe possibly set in the Blade Runner timeline, and said, let's make a movie about that.
Yeah.
And what was the first off-world use of androids, and it would have been mining on the moon. Super cool.
Yeah. And and again, these are all, man, how many times do I say? Someday I need to do a supercut of this. It's the little things.
It's the little things.
It's the little things. It's those little ideas that help flesh out a world. It does not have to be a big narration at the beginning or a text crawl or that much. Organically, you're being brought these other ideas. Mm-hmm. You're seeing the world for what it is. Where, one of the most famous things about Blade Runner is the car flying through the cityscape and all of these advertisements appearing all over the place, and that is very astute to understand that capitalism is kind of
it runs amok. Itself has evolved,
right? Exactly, and we can't hardly drive 2 minutes without seeing some sort of advertisement, and now it's even bigger.
And almost every sci-fi movie now explores that angle in some minute detail.
Right.
You think of like a Minority Report. You think you
another
probably
Philip K. Dick.
Yeah, you haven't seen the TV show Maniac on Netflix probably yet.
No,
but it explores that idea to a whole different level.
Right? And then there's like other real sci-fi like The Adventures of Pluto Nash.
Yes, classic in its genre.
Classic. So inspiring and inspiring.
Another thing,
Total Recall uses that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too. Yeah,
and I think what I love too that the sequel does is, and you see this a lot now in sequelized movies, is like when Blade Runner came out, it maybe possibly was a potential future for our present day, right? But 35 years later or whatever it was, that when the sequel was made, it was quite obvious that that is not going to be our present day. We have a different present day. So instead of trying to retcon that future to more fit our own reality, it says, well, this is a different future. This is a different possibility. This is maybe a path that we could have ended up at, but didn't. But we're going to continue that story. So, so you have things like the big Atari ads. You have the Pan Am ads.
Yep.
You have all of these things that still feel present within that universe.
One thing that I did see in watching 2049 that I didn't catch, but it's such a dirtbaggy thing to do in this movie. So Sony was one of the studios that made Blade Runner 2049. Sony is kind of a shit show right now.
Oh yeah.
And they are horrific at proliferation of ads in movies, and it's like their Ghostbusters movies all about Papa John's and Pepsi and shit, and it's like, and then their whole fight in Central in Times Central. No, wait, what?
Times Square.
I just had a stroke.
This is Central Time.
Oh. Did you see? This Nexus 6 just glitched.
It was like, it was amazing.
A little puff of smoke came out of my ears.
And then all of a sudden, all those memories were lost in tears of rain. Like tears of rain.
Time to die. No, but anyway, there's ads all over the place. So what do we see in the first like 10 minutes of this fucking movie? Sony sprawled across the building. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's gross.
Oh,
super gross. That's
my only knock against 2049. Because Sony ain't going to be a thing in 2049 if they keep making the movies they make.
Well, they gotta advertise all the things if they're gonna make any money on some of their movies.
Yeah, I guess so. So, but anyway, it's those concepts, it's those ideas, it's those, and of course the big central idea is empathy and what it means to be human versus what humans are creating and becoming human more and more every day.
Yeah.
Which really gets cranked up in 2049.
Oh yeah, big time. Like
which is fun, which is where it should go.
It goes to the concept of the soul in 2049 and really truly does absolutely talk about and examine those ideas.
Yeah. So I think really as far as we can take the original Blade Runner, because again, it's kind of talked to death over the last 36 years.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to talk a little bit about is our introduction to it.
Yes, I think, and that I also believe will segue itself very nicely and neatly into the fact that there are, at last count, 423 different versions of Blade Runner.
We each have 2 different versions of a final cut, quote unquote.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. Fucking Ridley Scott is George Lucasing the shit out of these movies.
Yeah. Okay.
So for me, the reason why I want to talk about this is that memories play a very heavy part in both these movies.
Sure.
The fact that the whole reason why Deckard falls in love with Rachel is over the fact that she has these memories that are very clear in her mind that aren't real. In some ways it talks. In some ways it speaks to how we approach nostalgia or being sentimental about things. And sometimes it can color our memories of various things that happen. But I clearly, very, very clearly remember when I was kind of first introduced to Blade Runner. I was staying at my dad's, and the reason why I want to bring up this little fact is because I find this so fascinating. But do you remember when apartment complexes used to include cable?
Sure. Yeah.
you would get like a very basic cable package that would just be part of your, and they would have like a big antenna someplace in the back of the apartment complex or whatever. Well, my dad had something like that. It was like basically local channels, WGN, which was the Chicago Superstation, and TBS, the Superstation as they call it.
Yeah, man, TBS was instrumental to my cable watching youth,
which is interesting because WGN is mine.
Right. See, I'm from Charleston, West Virginia. We didn't have WGN until we did eventually get it, but it wasn't until later.
Yeah, that's a staple of, because Bozo the Clown, dude.
Right.
It's like every morning I'd watch Bozo the Clown before going to school. I always wanted to win the grand prize game. Anyway, it was just basically throwing ping pong balls into buckets, and you get prizes for each bucket. It's amazing. It's amazing. So anyway,
you are a Bozo the Clown. Just saying.
So anyway, WGN was playing Blade Runner one night, and they would have, I don't know if it was one movie every week or if they had a movie every night at like 7 or 8, because they were on Central Time.
Yep.
So I don't remember because
and those were the days too when Indianapolis specifically was on Central Time half the year,
right?
And Eastern Time the other.
We
half.
did, we did
participate in daylight savings.
Yes, yes, us in Arizona.
Yeah.
So, and I think there was a specific reason why we didn't participate, but I don't remember. Anyway, so yeah, at that time it's like. It might have been the summertime. I don't remember exactly when, but they were going to play Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Now, this is before the director's cut. So they played, and it blew my fucking brains out. Like, oh my God, this whole idea of this future world it's like, as bleak as it was fascinating. I almost wanted to live there. It's like, this was my introduction to, another level of real sci-fi on top of the whole film noir aesthetic, and then of course, because it was before, I point out very specifically that it's before the director's cut because that's important to me too. It had the narration from Harrison Ford,
sure.
which is very much a film noir aspect.
Yes.
And that is why I am on record, and now I am on recorded record of saying that the theatrical cut, the 1982 theatrical cut, is my Blade Runner.
Yeah, okay.
Most people disagree with me. Most hoity-toity people will. In particular. No, I'm just saying. No, but there would be a lot of people who would like just totally shit on me for appreciating that more.
Well, no, I don't think that's fair.
No, but I'm saying that there are people who are that
right,
way.
and I'm just saying on record that I don't think that's fair to criticize that because here's the thing: we had to watch, it's like
oh
such
my
a chore.
God!
But we watched Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 in preparation for this episode, as we should. But we didn't watch it together. Usually we watch these together and then we record right after. But for the interest of time, we watched them separately on our own.
Yeah, because this is over 4 hours worth of business here.
Yeah, yes, it is.
It's almost 5 hours.
I think all told, it's almost 5 hours. Yeah. So it was just easier, more convenient to watch them separately. And what I decided to do was Geoff watched the final cut, or what he thought was the final cut.
I don't know if it was or not.
The last time I watched the final cut, it was not the final cut. It was a fucked up disc that was some bastardization of the theatrical and the director's
all
cut.
All of them. It was like a bastardization of all of them.
So what I decided to do, since I had not seen the theatrical cut in so long, is I said, well, I'll watch the theatrical cut. I'll watch that. And then I decided, well, I'm not going to watch the theatrical cut. I'll watch the international cut, which, are you confused yet? The international cut was the international version of the theatrical cut, which had a little bit of extra violent bits, little extended
I like violent bits.
Yeah, and you can't really, it doesn't really register, where those moments exist. But I was like, all right, well, I might as well, if I'm going to watch the narration, I might as well watch the narration with extra violence, which is in the final cut. They took the final cut should be the director's cut plus the violence from the international cut plus an extended unicorn dream sequence. That is the final cut.
I didn't have a unicorn dream sequence.
Jeff doesn't have a unicorn
well, but then again,
sequence. I have this little extra bit of narration after the Tears of Rage speech from Harrison Ford that drives me crazy in my Final Cut disc.
But now I will say though, the 10-year-old Jeff needed that narration to understand.
That's fair, and that's interesting because your experience was with the theatrical cut, and that's what blew your mind. My experience was the first time I saw Blade Runner was the theatrical cut, but it was actually the U.S. broadcast cut, which might be what you saw too.
Probably
on TBS. The two movies I remember TBS playing the absolute shit out of was Blade Runner and John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh, yeah.
I used to. It would be a Saturday afternoon, and I could flip a coin, and one of those two movies would be playing, and it was the best. And I watched the shit out of them, but I usually didn't catch the whole thing. I think the first time I saw The Thing and the first time I saw Blade Runner, I actually watched them in piecemeal because I caught them like halfway through, and then the next time I caught it from the beginning, you know. But anyway, I loved Blade Runner for the same reasons you did. It was like this aesthetic that I wanted to live in. This world that, yes, it was dark and grimy and scary, that this seems so fascinating and interesting.
To be honest with you, it felt like what I thought being an adult was.
Yeah.
Like you go to a job. You don't really love your job.
Right.
You don't know anybody who loves their job.
There's a sense of duty.
There's a sense of duty.
And even in your sense of duty, there's conflict morally, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. And then on a superficial level, that opening shot.
Oh, my God.
Of just you driving in this flying car into this city with the flaming smokestacks
and the bass line of that
I wanted my whole life scored to Vangelis. Yeah, I mean,
right.
Yeah, so, but yes, I aesthetically was in love with Blade Runner. I don't think I had truly understood or digested the story until the director's cut.
Sure. So, yeah, and with the director's cut, when that came along, of course, it didn't take very long before video stores were losing the original cut. Not because they had to send it back or anything. Not like Ridley Scott showed up with a badge and said, we're confiscating this, whatever, however he would talk.
No,
he didn't do that. It just... The tapes would eventually die or go missing.
And they weren't reissuing
them. They weren't reissuing them. So the director's cut was showing, and it's like, but where's the film noir dialogues? Where's that? Where'd it go? What's this fucking unicorn bullshit? We're gonna talk about that. But anyway, so I was working at VH1. This is the video store in which we met.
Yeah.
I was managing. I think it was when I was managing the one on 46th in Arlington. Oh boy, that's scary. That's a scary place, man. That was a scary place in the late 90s. Yeah. We were right next to a check cashing payday loan place, and that's a scary place, yo.
Predatory loans, man.
Yeah. Then later, or before that, it was a welfare place. So it's like you leave that place at midnight.
Yeah.
And I often had to work alone.
That's too late.
It's kind of scary.
That's a bit sketch.
Yeah, it was a bit sketchy of a place because,
especially if you're working alone. I mean, yeah,
and and we would have characters who would come in and stuff. But anyway, we didn't have. I don't think we had either copy of Blade Runner. This was a place. I'm not shitting you. This is a place where a guy came in, rented The Avengers. Brought it back an hour later.
You're talking about
Ray Fiennes, Uma Thurman,
right?
Sean Connery,
right?
Brought it back an hour later, and it's like, can I get something else? I thought this was going to be like Captain America and shit. I'm like, it is not. It is a big pile of shit, sir.
That I feel like happened at almost every video store, though.
Yeah.
Let's be fair.
Oh, the guy came in, and you could tell he was like, I don't want to sound like an idiot, but And it's like,
I'm pretty
sir,
sure
you
that
can go get
I'm
whatever
pretty sure
you want.
that I have a few stories like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he ended up swapping out with like a porno.
Well, it's like, fuck it, I'm just jerking off
you know
now.
what? I'm just gonna get Big Booty Hose number 57. Is that cool? It's like, yeah, that's cool, dude.
This movie's already put a 90-minute dent in my evening.
You're right. Yeah, might as well just go ahead and sit back.
I'm just gonna toss one off at this point.
Yeah, we're just gonna write this one off and toss one off and just call it even. Okay, so but anyway, I was filling in. There was Christmas parties that each store was having. They would all go out to dinner with the owner or whatever. So I was filling in at the one that was at 61st and Allisonville.
Okay,
and they had the original cut. And when the manager came back in to basically relieve me, because I was just filling in, I was like, can I buy this? And she's like, yeah, sure. It's like, nobody ever rents it. I'm like, what the fuck? It's like, I like got it for like $5.
Yeah.
It was like in a clamshell and everything.
Nice.
I was like, oh my God, this is fucking amazing. So I got the original. This was 98 or so. So it's like well beyond any opportunity of getting that original cut. I got it.
and it's probably, in all honesty, when you bought it for $5, it's probably worth a few $100s.
To me, it was. I don't know.
But you think about gray markets today.
Yeah, because I think, because see, this was one of those movies that
probably wasn't available. The internet was sort of.
No.
There wasn't a whole lot of downloading of movies in 1998.
No, I could have gone to a comic show and sold that copy to the bootleg man.
Oh, easily.
And he would have gladly paid me 10 times at least more than what I paid for it.
Oh, for sure.
But no, I wanted it.
Yep.
So no, bootleg man.
No
this
bootleg
is mine.
man. It's
mine.
I have this now.
Yes. Because that was back during a time also, it's like Warner Brothers didn't own this movie initially. It was distributed by, much like Star Wars was distributed by 20th Century Fox.
Right.
Blade Runner was distributed by Warner Brothers. I think, and I could be wrong, and I could be just talking out of my ass, or again, this could be nostalgia coloring my memory. I want to say that the original VHS that I had this on, that I bought from that store, was like released by Embassy or something. It was not Warner. It was not a Warner Brothers tape, I don't think. Anyway.
Yeah, could be. Well, when did you see the theatrical for the first time then?
The original theatrical?
Or not the theatrical, the director's cut.
Shortly after it was released, so like 92, 93, someplace around there. It was on VHS. I didn't see it in the theater. I don't think it was playing around here. At least not where 15-year-old me could walk to.
Right. I walked to see it. It was one of those things where downtown Charleston, the little movie theater down there, it had it. I remember on the marquee, Blade Runner director's cut, and I was like, what does that mean? Like,
that was my first concept of a director's cut.
Yeah, I was like, I know that movies have directors, but aren't they all director's cuts? It was really truly the first time where I realized that there was this idea of studio interference, of a vision that wasn't realized in the original version, and it really kind of got me, I don't know, it just got me really excited. And I walked to the theater. I saw it by myself on like a Saturday afternoon in the theater, and I was like, I think like 4 other people there. And I was 13 years old, and they didn't give a shit at that theater.
No,
Most theaters didn't give a shit.
It really wasn't until
they were just happy to sell the ticket. To be honest.
It wasn't really until later in the 90s that movie theaters started kind of cracking. Yeah. It may have even been the 2000s before movie theaters really began cracking down on.
Yeah, and then, I mean, I think Blade Runner's R-rated, but it's a pretty soft R.
It's language R.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of nudity. Zora.
Oh yeah,
but I mean, it's pretty minimal.
Oh yeah, I mean, it is about as much as the PG-rated Swamp Thing had.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's just that Swamp Thing didn't have the language.
But yeah, I watched it, and it was. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was the theater experience. Maybe it was the fact that it was the first time I had really truly been able to devote that kind of attention to this movie. But
yeah.
And I noticed the lack of narration right away, but I also had seen it before, heard it before.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, how does that affect your mindset, right?
Sure.
Because I knew the information in the narration, but I'm seeing it in this new way, and it had a bigger effect on me. I don't know if that's due to the fact that it was just on a big screen with beautiful sound and not on my shitty TV at home.
Yeah, your shitty little tube TV.
Or what, but that became like the definitive Blade Runner for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, I think I appreciate because I don't know. I mean, like, I could probably, if I were to write something, I'd probably overwrite things, and therefore the narration speaks to my style of expository
well, I
stuff.
know why some of the narration speaks to you, and it's because it's the world building.
Yes,
there is a lot of world building in the narration
and emotional. Like, there is some emotional context there too.
Yeah, some of those areas are where it falls flat for me, because I watched it again last night and I was like, oh, I don't really like that at all. But then other moments where he talks about the description of the language that Edward James Olmos' character has, and things like that.
It's a blend of what, like Anglo.
It's like English,
Asian.
Spanish, German. Yeah,
that's another idea that carries over to things like Firefly.
Yeah.
You know,
so there were those kind of elements. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That is this extra layer of world building. But some of the more self-reflective stuff that his character puts forth, I didn't really care for. It's like,
that's fair.
I'd rather just kind of suss that out for myself,
sure,
and let the emotion of the moment tell me what to think, or allow me to make a decision or think about different possibilities. I don't need to know in this moment that Deckard is still thinking about Rachel. That to me is just kind of manipulation.
Well, I mean, but I can understand that, but you know, you're wrong. That's what I should do is I should put some narration in me explaining how I think you're wrong.
that would actually be pretty funny. It's sort of like the stand-up comic. His name is going to escape me right now, but he does that in some of his stand-up. Like, he has a special. He's doing a live show, right?
Yeah. But
then in the recorded show that's on Netflix, he puts narration over it to kind of like give you this sense of, oh shit, this joke's not really working, is it? It's pretty funny. Dimitri Martin, he does that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I don't really know what else to talk about the original that's not already been like.
Yeah,
I mean the fact that it's. I mean, because like you could even get down to like the fact that the way Rachel is dressed is meant to evoke those kind of like almost like a Lana Turner or something that from a past era of angular, very tidy, very neat.
Have you seen? I have an image of Sean Young from Blade Runner, from the set of Blade Runner, that I use every now and then as my profile picture in social media.
Polaroid?
The Polaroid. She took a series of Polaroids on the set of Blade Runner that to me is this aesthetic all its own.
Yeah.
Right? So she almost brought like a retro futuristic aesthetic to the Blade Runner aesthetic with these photos, because they're all in Polaroids, right? And they're framed and shot as if these characters are who they are, right? But it's all during the making and kind of the behind the scenes. Like it's I already love this aesthetic enough. Now you frame that future aesthetic, but as it would be envisioned retroactively in the 80s.
Right.
And that's hard to explain. without
it's layers upon layers.
Yeah, but it breaks my brain in all the right ways, right?
Yeah. It's one of those things that right. It's like if anybody listened a couple of weeks ago to our Suspiria review, this was like this kind of one of those things where it's like when you think about the layers and sometimes you can't articulate it, but it just breaks your brain down to the point where you're just going and I think I did that a lot in that episode because like I'm but there are times where it's the good things where you still can't explain why you love, but it's just it because of all of the layers of what that surface thing, that Polaroid is, right. It also kind of plays with some of the idea, like like some of the tech that's used in there where they're like scanning pictures, like that even carries over into 2049 even to another level,
right?
It just feels like it fits so well.
Yeah.
What do you say we? One note I made that I thought was hilarious in the original Blade Runner. Deckard drunk dials Rachel.
Yeah, he does.
That's hilarious.
He does.
That's hilarious because he's like at a fucking strip club,
Yeah, so all right, that's hilarious, but that also.
I think we're at the note where I say let Jason take the floor.
And I really don't even want to fucking talk about this, but I have to talk about this because you're right. That moment is funny. He drunk dials Rachel, but if you're talking about the context of a love story, and that Deckard and Rachel fall in love, which is incredibly important to the sequel.
It's incredibly important just in general because of the empathy angle.
Right, but the consummation of that love in the quote unquote love scene is a big fucking problem for me. It is about the least consensual act of love that I could imagine in this movie that is supposed to be a love scene. Like it is. Here's where my defense of this comes in. I think this defense is bullshit, but this is how I would defend this scene. Basically, in this scene, you have Deckard and Rachel. It's implied that they have sex, but the lead up into the cut of them seemingly about to engage in consensual sexual intercourse is Deckard pushing, shoving Rachel, demanding that she tell him to tell him to kiss her. Basically, he is intimidating her into giving him consent. It's not super great. And I'm going to put a button here, but it's not. It's a very, very soft butt. I think maybe if I'm going to defend this scene, it's the fact that Harrison Ford still does not quite view her as a human.
Yeah.
He views her as an object.
It's an appliance.
As an appliance. And he needs some sort of confirmation from her that she feels maybe the same way he does. I think it's almost like it's weird, but I think the narration of the movie kind of lends to this, where there's a moment in the narration where Harrison Ford is commenting on someone's use of the word skin job.
Yeah.
And how that is how people in this future, they call androids the same way we in our present day, derogatory would refer to African Americans with the N-word, right?
Sure.
So it's almost like if you had imagined, someone who is a bigot or a racist who finds themselves attracted to someone of the race that they feel is inferior, that they're angry with themselves. It could also be related to the fact that maybe you're a homosexual and you are realizing you're attracted to the same sex, and you have been taught and programmed that is wrong. So there's this violent reaction to that feeling within yourself. I'm not saying any of this is to be.
It's here's the thing. I didn't want to quote unquote defend or try to argue against the way you feel about this because I agree that it's dicey.
Let me finish real quick.
Sure, I'll let you finish. I'm gonna
let you finish. So this scene has always felt wrong to me. It's always felt gross. Even as a kid, I never quite understood it. I was like, wait a minute, why is he being mean to Rachel? And that's kind of always stuck with me, and I've kind of tried to rationalize it, I think, with each viewing, and I maybe come to understand the motivation. I don't know. I've never really read much on Scott's direction of this scene or Harrison Ford's take on this scene, but I would like to think that that's sort of the reaction. It's like he's finally overcoming his feeling that she's an appliance or a robot or an android or a thing into someone who has consciousness and is a human being that he is falling in love with. I still don't really like it. I really wish it had just been a little bit more natural than that. He kind of already establishes that feeling when he kicks her out of his apartment the first time. I don't think it needed to go where it went into what I feel is a non-consensual scene that we're supposed to then believe is love from that point forward from both sides.
It's really it's dicey. My take is it is worldviews are shattering, particularly on his side, because this kind of plays to the idea that is in the novel, from what I understand, of the fact that humans are technically not any different than the replicants, that they are programmed to think and do things a certain way. Now, whether that's necessarily good or bad is case-by-case scenario. The same as replicants are being told that you exist for XYZ, and that's case by case. If they run or if they do something bad, then they are case by case judged on that. I think it's meant to kind of tie that idea together. It's the idea that Deckard's whole existence in life is to hunt down Rachel, essentially.
Right.
But now he has a conflicting thought that bubbles up, and that plays out much better in 2049.
Yes.
In a lot of different ways that the filmmakers had the ability to do in the 2049 version that I don't think Ridley Scott necessarily could have.
But I think there's also
or would have had the cognizance to think about.
What I kind of like about 2049 in that sense is that you don't necessarily have to even believe. What I kind of honestly believe is that Deckard maybe never really truly loved Rachel, and that he didn't actually, spoiler alert, understand the meaning of love until he had a child.
Right. Yeah, so that brings up, I think that's a good segue here now, because we only get Harrison Ford for about 40 minutes.
Right.
Of 2049. It's heavily implied that he is in a bunch of the movie in the early trailers.
Yeah.
He is not.
No.
He is the I guess the result of Agent K or Officer K, which is Ryan Gosling, his investigation to try to find this anomaly that exists in the world. So 2049 is all about the fact that there are now Blade Runners who are indeed replicants. Replicants were disallowed after the Nexus 6 because they were too close to humanity, and they were running, they were disobeying, they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. And Jared Leto, who is no surprise a weird motherfucker in this movie, has built a Nexus 8 version that does follow orders, that does obey, that does the things that they're programmed to do. And I believe they either have a much longer life expectancy or an open-ended life expectancy. And Officer K, who is Ryan Gosling, has discovered that one of the replicants that he offed has basically has a body buried in his front lawn that turns out to be Rachel's body.
Yeah, and these, I think the ones that they hunt are the Nexus 8s, right?
Nexus 8s, yes.
Right, so they're...
Which I think Officer K is one, too, because because Dave Bautista asks, what's it like to hunt one of your own?
One of your own, right.
Yeah, and he's like, well, I don't run, so...
I think that he means one of your own in the absolute sense of you're a synthetic, a replicant. But because I think that Gosling K is actually one of what's his name? Jared Leto's character's name?
Wallace.
I think he's one of Wallace's who obeys, right?
But that's the Nexus 8. That's what the opening text
I know.
talks about.
I thought
Nexus 8s were the ones who were perfected.
I thought the Nexus 8s were the ones who were like the last bad ones. It doesn't really matter. Or bad ones. The last ones who rebelled.
No, actually, now that I think about it, well, I don't know, because
I think
Dave
it was
Bautista
the Nexus
was around
8s
for
that
a
were
while.
like the biggest problem or something.
Well, but the opening text crawl says that the Nexus 8 was the perfection, basically, which was the ones that obeyed.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, but so that, I don't know what that...
It doesn't matter too terribly much.
Also, there's a lot of talk about an apocalypse that essentially happened, an electronic apocalypse.
Oh, the blackout, yeah.
Which I think is meant to kind of parallel the book's World War... What do they call it? World War Terminus.
Okay.
Which was what basically led the world to where they're at in the book, which would have been the original. Whereas I think in the original, you just overpopulation and environmental issues. Because again, remember, once upon a time, we all collectively believed that environmental issues were a problem and overpopulation was going to be a problem. Not so much anymore. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think they just traded that so that they didn't have to explain a war where there's still a lot of people living.
I mean,
in the original,
that's kind of the nice thing about these movies, though, is they don't really go into a lot of the socio-political.
Right. No, you just understand the world that you're in based on what you see and feel.
Right. Exactly.
Which is probably more realistic than it. I mean, almost. Again, talking about like the programming ideas of...
Well, imagine if you're born into it, right?
You don't have any concept.
You don't have any concept of why things are the way they are. Right, exactly.
Yeah. So the replicant, Rachel, is determined by one of Ant-Man's buddies, the guy who was in the Ant-Man movies.
Wait, who?
The coroner at the police...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
He's one of Scott Lang's buddies in the Ant-Man movies. He's a Russian guy in those movies.
Well, he works for Claire Underwood Buttercup.
Right, yeah. Yeah. He gets his fucking throat collapsed by Love.
Oh, yeah.
She's fucking scary in this movie.
Yeah, she is.
But anyway, so he discovered, it's like, okay, well, she died during pregnancy, or during childbirth.
Right.
There was an emergency C-section.
Yep.
And basically, that's when they kind of go in deeper to find out, oh, shit, this is a replicant. And immediately Robin Wright's like, we got to fucking cover this shit up.
Yeah.
It's like, nothing happened.
This breaks the world.
This will destroy the world.
This breaks the world is what she says. Yep.
Right, because as a human...
Am I the only one that sees the fucking sunrise?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's the one who understands that humans are fragile.
Yep.
There's plenty of references.
She could be a replicant, quite honestly.
She could be, but... it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter. She understands that from a religious standpoint, from a existential standpoint,
right?
People don't want to find out that they're no longer special.
Well, you don't want to find out that your dishwasher has the same reproductive qualities that you do.
Right. I don't want to wake up one morning and find out that my toaster and dishwasher now have some kid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That would be a rude awakening that morning. Holy fuck.
There's already like this very uneasy cohabitation.
Yes, because constantly Kay is subject to being called a skin job, being called...
it's written on his door.
It's written on his
Fuck
door.
you, skin job, or whatever. Yeah.
Or Skinner.
Or fuck off, Skinner. Yeah.
And I mean, like, another cop, like, basically goes out of his way to spit on him, basically, by calling him a fucking skin job.
Yep.
So it's there's already that uneasy balance. There's probably a social consciousness that remembers the Nexus 6 going bad. I mean, even though that seems such a small story in a larger world, there is a the creation rising up to kill its own god, basically, in the original Blade Runner.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you end up setting up here, and I think this is a simple film, a simple movie, simple sequel or continuation, but it sets up some really complicated, conflicting antagonists, if you will. So you have
because now you have people who should Kay just do his job,
right?
Then you have the replicants that helped hide the child and the fact that Rachel had a child, that a replicant was able to reproduce. You have her saying, you got to go kill Deckard. Don't let him reveal to Wallace, because the thing is Wallace kind of is seeking perfection himself in the fact that he wants to create replicants that can be basic humans.
Well, what Wallace wants is world domination.
Yeah,
and he has recognized the fact that type of dominance that he wants to achieve can only be done on the backs of slaves.
Yes,
and he says this very specifically: I can only make so many. So what he wants is the reproductive qualities of replicants so that he can use that to his advantage. So he can quickly and more efficiently create more slaves.
Yes, and
so then you have Robin Wright, who is Kay's boss, who wants to destroy the child. So she's a villain in her own right, but her motives are different.
Yes, she is an agent of order, whereas Wallace is an agent of chaos.
Yeah.
And by the way, do you kind of imagine that they filmed all of Jared Leto's scenes just at his house? Like, don't you think he lives in that kind
of... He lives in that fucking, like, Tyrell Corporation temple.
Like a weirdo fucking place.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like he brought his own clothes. He has those Komodos. He just hangs out in them, and he lives in a fucking weirdo joint.
Yeah.
I mean...
Definitely. He's come quite a ways from his Jordan Catalano days.
Yeah, he's gotten to the point now where when he played the Joker, he mails used condoms to his co-stars.
I know, right? Dude, I read once. So he's a dedicated actor. I read once
he's a method actor.
I read once that when he played the role of the guy who killed John Lennon.
Oh yeah, Mark David Chapman.
Thank you. Yes, that when he played that role, he got really fat to play that role. And he ate ice cream with olive oil, like, mixed into it.
Oh,
like he would take scoops of ice cream.
Oh,
he would load it up with olive oil.
Oh my god!
And then he would microwave it, and then he would drink it, and that was all he ate until he got super fucking fat. Isn't that crazy?
Oh my god!
And that movie was like a bullshit movie. Like, it was a terrible movie.
It's funny because it's like when he won the Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club.
Yeah.
And it's like
he went the opposite direction for that. Didn't he lose a lot of weight for that?
Yeah. He had to play an AIDS victim.
Right.
Yeah. And a cross-dressing or trans.
I'm not sure.
But basically, he was playing a female character, or at the very least was dressed as a female or dressed as a hooker, really, is what I think he was. But when he went to the Oscars, like, okay, yes, he's wearing the white dinner jacket where most people wear black. Sure, okay, fine. He's got long hair and a beard. Okay, sure, fine.
Whatever.
But, like, when he's, like, giving us, it's like, this guy's normal. He is not normal. He is not a normal dude.
And he's got like a pretty popular rock band. Like, he's an
interesting dude.
He is an interesting dude.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but to be honest, I don't want to make a movie with him. I don't want used condoms mailed to me.
I feel like I would just get lost in his blue eyes. Like, I think he's got some kind of, like, witchy powers.
Okay, so that brings me back to something else I want to talk about. Ryan Gosling is unnerving in this movie because he is a replicant and he doesn't have a great deal of emotion. He does emote he almost entirely emotes with his eyes.
Okay.
Like his face is so still that every time there was just like when he's looking up like the DNA.
The DNA matching.
And he's like it's just him staring into like the fucking viewfinder or whatever. It's like I got a little creeped out. It's like you're too still. You're not a real person.
He does do a great job in that movie because where he ends up at the end, his baseline, they talk about his baseline a lot, and he is way beyond his baseline, right? But it's only in his actions.
Only in his actions and his eyes.
Right. It isn't necessarily in like his the way he emotes. Yeah.
Because he only very, very few times actually raises his voice. Like when he thinks he's the child, which I love the fact that they turn that on its head.
That was so good.
Because there's so the child is so well hidden that when he matches up the DNA, it is given to a boy and a girl.
And a girl, yeah.
And he has these memories, and he has this wooden horse that has the birth date inscribed on it. And his memories lead him and the audience to believe that he is the child.
Well, he finds the horse.
He finds the horse. He knows exactly where to go.
That's pretty goddamn definitive, right?
Yeah, he finds it in Lenny James's Dungy child slavery.
He goes to the dream maker, and she tells him that these were real dreams.
Right.
I mean, there is a really good pathway. You believe what he believes.
Yes.
Which is...
And it's not a trick, and it's not a lie to you when it's revealed that that's not the case.
But it's also... It's brilliant subversion because when you are being led down that path and you believe that he is the child, you also, as an audience viewer, this is the way I felt anyway, was that that's really fucking convenient, isn't it? You know, I'm thinking to myself, that's kind of lame. You know, like, oh, it would be him. He's the child, right? And then when they come back and they say, nope, it's like, fuck, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
And his world shatters.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to some of the change that Harrison Ford went through in the original. And it's like
he's constantly going through this crisis of identity.
Yes.
Yeah, and
it's affecting his job, it's affecting and it doesn't. The one thing it does not affect through the whole thing is his relationship with Joy.
Yeah.
Joy is his holographic girlfriend.
Yeah, she's an AI.
I want
one.
one.
Constructed by the Wallace Corporation.
I want one. I do. Elon Musk, get out there and build me a fucking hologram girlfriend. Do that before you go to jail. Because you're probably. I think he's going to go to jail. He's like
Federal Trade Commission shit.
I think he cooked the books at Tesla.
Ooh, dang.
Yeah, because he kept leading. He kept leading investors down the path that they're going to produce so many, and so on and so forth. But it could not deliver.
It seems to me like he would have that kind of hubris. So, yep.
I also think that he also may have secretly built moonrakers and plans on taking select people to.
Well, according to Elon Musk, we're all living in a simulation anyway. So
holy shit, he's a Bond villain.
He is. Yeah, he is a Bond villain.
Elon Musk, Hugo Drax, that's the same number of letters. Guys, he is going to Moonraker this place. We're all going to be gassed to death.
And he dated fucking Grimes, which is so weird. He's the guy who, like, 10 years ago, you look at him, he's like, yeah, he's kind of like badass, right? This is a cool guy. Now he's like a fucking Bond villain.
Yeah, I know.
He's like the douchey Bond villain. Yeah,
he's Hugo Drax. Same number of letters. I see through you, Elon Musk. You're going to gas this whole planet. We're all going to die, and you're going to have your select few people in Jaws.
Or maybe he'll start to try to control the weather with his weather satellites, like in the Avengers movie. Call back.
I hope he is conducting business meetings with people in bear costumes.
Like Sean Connery on speed dial, man. Sean Connery's not doing anything right now. He's just making moves to Sean Connery wants to be a Bond villain. He's like, fuck it, I played Bond enough.
Yeah.
I want to be the villain now.
Yeah.
I can get in with Elon Musk. We're gonna reappropriate all my old movie plots.
Hopefully we live in Zardoz someday. I'll wear a red diaper.
Well, how's that for a fucking diversion?
Yeah. So, but anyway, Joy, Kay and Joy, like she eggs him on a little bit.
She does.
Which almost is that being programmed in by love.
I love it. I love it because, yeah, right? I mean, is it or...
Love, by the way, Love is the replicant henchman to Jared Leto.
Right.
And every time he does something terrible or she has to do something bad, she cries.
Yeah.
Did you notice that?
I did notice that.
Because she knows that the one replicant that he's inspecting to see if she has the ability to reproduce, when she knows he's going to kill her, she starts crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
But it's almost like
But then by the end, she becomes a fucking murder monster machine.
Well, I don't think she's in control of her actions. No. I don't. And I think that her emotional response is a reflection of that. Oh, that's awesome in and of its own self. But yes, getting back to Joy, you're right. I mean, you get the sense that she says, I always knew that you were special.
Call him Joe.
But of course, this is a program.
That's true.
And so every one of these programs is going to make its owner feel like they're special, right?
This is why I want one.
Yeah. but that's intoxicating.
Right.
And
exactly.
and he's
it's what people desire.
He's a victim of his own making.
Yeah.
So he views her as more human than human because that's the way he wants to view himself.
Yes.
Right? But yet at the same time he's being manipulated.
Right.
It's so fucking good. Like that is the shit in this movie, right?
And but it does not color or miscolor the sweetness of their relationship. Like he is the most human character in this movie.
Absolutely.
Through his affection for what he can't have.
Yep.
And that's good stuff.
Oh yeah.
That's good stuff. One thing about so when we discover that Kay is not the child, the all-important messiah almost of the replicants, the miracle, right?
Yeah.
It's a relief for me because sometimes main characters are not important people,
right?
They are just the means to the end.
Yes. They drive the story and they drive the narrative, but they're not the story or the narrative.
And that almost makes them more realistic. Mm-hmm. Because, man, I hate keep bringing this shit up. But if you think about Star Wars, you think about how small that world really, that everybody's a fucking Skywalker, that everybody is connected to everybody else. It's like, expand that a little bit. Expand it out. Let's see some more that doesn't have any fucking thing to do with anybody else.
Yeah.
Whereas the Blade Runner saga, because now we're talking about one big long story between two movies, 30 years, does not rely on convenience. On this person has to be connected to Harrison Ford. Why can't he just be the guy who sets the ball rolling? I mean, he doesn't, or the guy who just so happens in his mundane job of killing other things,
right?
Stumbles upon something,
right?
You know, that's a good story.
That is a good story. That's how most stories start.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's slice of life. Oh shit! This weird thing happened. Now this is a whole thing.
This was something that was literally buried. That has been unearthed.
It's just a discovery that's almost 30 years old.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's
and it makes
regular. That's real world.
And the passage of time is interesting to me too because we're not concerned with everything that's happened in the last 30 years. We're concerned. They made those
little shorts
with
that I didn't watch.
They're okay. I mean, they're interesting vignettes. But what we're interested in is this continuation of Deckard and Rachel's story, which we can only tell because of this happenstance.
Right. And the funny thing is that their continuation of their story leads to 40 minutes of Deckard and 65 seconds of Rachel or something,
Right.
Which is in and of itself is an interesting way to continue a story.
Absolutely.
It's the impact on everyone else, not,
well, that's a great point. It is the fact that this is a world-changing event if it were to come to light. Regardless of whether it comes to light, the people who know it are changed.
Yes.
Yeah. And should we talk about the replicant, not replicant?
One moment. We're gonna finish on. That's gonna be our big finale here.
Okay. All right.
What I wanted to do real quick with about 2049, just a couple of things that I noted. First of all, there's a lot of just expanding that world. It's one of the concerns that we have, and the reason why we were personally concerned about there being a sequel is that the idea of, they're just going to increase stuff that we are nostalgic for. You like those flying cars, then we're going to have a whole fucking army of flying cars. And they don't do that for the sake of that thing being something that all of us remember. They don't any characters that carry over from the original, namely Deckard and Gaff, who is played by Edward James Olmos. They are there for specific reasons, and they are there as part of Kay's investigation, not because, hey, remember these guys? Don't you want to see these guys do more things? And I really, really kind of appreciate that. It's a carry forward of themes, not of moments that we are specifically nostalgic for.
It's exactly the reason why the Tron sequel failed.
Exactly. It's the opposite of the Tron sequel.
Yep.
A couple of things that I also liked, talking about the carrying forward of those themes. At one point, there's a trio of robot hookers that walk up to robo hookers.
Robo hookers.
Row bitches.
Row bitches. Wow.
One of the people who helped hide the child is, I guess, like a madam.
Robo-ho?
Yeah, right. A robo-ho.
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 You bitch better have my money. Anyway. That just makes me think of a pimp called Slickback from Boondocks.
Yep.
Anyway, it's like a tribe called Quest.
Called Slickback.
Anyway, so they're told by one of the women that you later find out was one of the hiders of the child, go up to that guy in the green jacket, which is Kay, find out what he knows. So they go up and it's like, hey, it's like two of them are like, he's a fucking Blade Runner. We're out.
Yeah.
The really hot one sticks behind, and it's like, you want to do a thing?
Do this thing?
Do this thing?
Want to do this?
Want to do my thing? I'll do your thing with my thing. We'll put our things together.
We'll have robo-ho sex.
It's which is probably just like a plug in an outlet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, right. Anyway, and his little thing for Joy, he's got like a little Joy that he can take with him.
Yeah. And uses the Peter and the Wolf.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, and so she hears that and she's like, oh, I get it. You're not into real girls, which is kind of like the new gay straight sort of. It's like, oh, you're not into girls,
right? And she's not even a real girl.
And she's not even a real girl, right?
In quotes, yeah.
And I just it's the little things, man. It's
the
little things that are interesting. But that does lead to one of my favorite scenes when Joy wants to give Kay a gift. He gave her a gift of having the little stick that he can take her with him.
Right. She's can disconnect from the main
from the track
unit track at home. Yeah.
Right. So she can go wherever he goes.
Yeah.
And she decides to give him a present by hiring the robo hooker
Yeah.
and merging with her
Yeah.
so that they can have sex.
Yeah.
And okay, yes, I'm kind of the fucking dirtbag that's like, yeah, the sex scene, fuck yeah. But it's also really super, super awesomely shot.
Yeah.
And it's so well merged.
Yeah.
Like to see them like syncing with one another. It's so fucking cool, man.
And yeah, the sync is never perfect, but it's good enough.
Right.
Yeah.
But when they're still, they're like a combination
Yeah.
of the two.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's one of those scenes too where Gosling, he's not giving us much emotionally.
No, it's unnerving.
Yeah, but he,
You can tell he appreciates it.
yeah.
But then the next morning, it's not him that kicks the robo hooker.
It's her.
It's Joy.
I know. It's
Get out.
amazing. And she's like, well, I've been inside there,
Yeah,
and
it's not as much
there's not
as-
as much there as you think there is. Yeah, which is like almost this.
Almost a tell.
Well, it's not even that. It's this classism, right?
True.
So you have this synthetic, this android, this Nexus 8 or whatever she is, who is almost looking down on Joy. Right? She is looking down
But
on
also
Joy.
punching up a little bit because Joy is the corporate
Yeah.
thing that you purchase for a lot of money, and she's just the cheap
Right.
trick,
Yeah.
basically.
Right. Like somebody paid for her and was bought and paid for, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a classism.
Yeah.
It's the little things, Jeff.
It's the little things. Simple movie, but it's got
It's
got
so
layers.
rich. Yeah.
yeah. It's like it's like saying, and I'm only saying this because I'm starting to get hungry, but it's like a taco is a simple thing, but it is simple based on concept. But the stuff that makes up the taco is so delicious.
Yes.
You know, it's like that's
Flavorful combinations.
yes.
Yeah.
And it truly is the sum. It's the whole of its the sum of its parts.
Yes.
You know. Yeah. But anyway, so let's get to what I know you're dying to debate.
I'm
here.
dying to. I don't want to debate it. I just think that it's
Well,
all right.
what's
All right,
give
so-
us the thesis.
So here's the thing. What you have is you have the theatrical version of Blade Runner, which essentially assumes that Deckard is human, Rachel is not, and they go and they live go off and live happily ever after. And then you have the director's cut, and then the final cut, which posit a different idea. They insert a dream sequence with a unicorn, which I think was shot from Legend.
yeah,
Um,
it was.
and
By the
tie
way,
that
Legend's awesome.
and tie that into the origami figure of a unicorn
The Gaff is
that Geoff gives at the end of
the Ever James Olmos character is almost like, you know, they talk about like his varying language and how, you know, he uses Spanish, English, Asian, you know, Chinese or whatever. He himself is an amalgamation of all of those different I guess races, because Ever James almost is Hispanic, but he
almost doesn't look like him at all.
no,
in
he's
the
got
original Blade
blue
Runner.
eyes,
Yeah,
and he also has an Asian aesthetic.
yeah,
But he's always tinkering with origami.
yeah. He's leaving a little origami figures
Wherever he
everywhere.
goes, he leaves little origami.
So he sees in all versions of the movie, after Deckard watches Roy Batty die, he says, paraphrasing, job well done, and he mentions Rachel and he says it's too bad she can't live,
But then again,
who does? And you get this. He in all versions, Deckard gets worried. He's like, "Oh shit! Did
Gaff
go and kill?
Did he retire her?
Retire Rachel?
Yeah.
Right." So he goes to his apartment. Rachel is still in bed,
and he's worried for a second.
and he's worried for a sec that she's dead, but she's not. And they're like, "All right, we got to go." And they go to get in the elevator and leave, but Deckard notices something on the ground,
and it's a unicorn origami.
So here's where it gets interesting. I don't remember. I have to watch it again, the final cut or director's cut. I don't remember Harrison Ford's reaction to that unicorn, because in the theatrical cut or the international cut, he looks at it with like he's not going to follow us kind of look.
That he was already
there, and he spared us, and we've got a head start.
Yes,
that's
the
what
narration
you get.
is he's been there.
Yeah,
he doesn't want to kill her for me, but he will do his job if he's asked. So he is telling us
we've got a head start. Go right,
yeah.
Right. I'm giving this as a favor. Right.
Yeah, this is I'm helping you out because you helped us out,
and that's really important because you see that in Harrison Ford's eyes.
Yes.
You actually
because he almost
absolutely understand what he understands.
The gears are turning, and you can see that in Harrison Ford's eyes.
I can't remember. I don't think it's the same way in the final cut or director's cut. I think that he picks it up and it, boom, is a cut. I don't know what realization you see in his eyes. I have to look at it again.
One of the cuts goes back to the unicorn.
Does it?
Yeah, one of the cuts goes back to the unicorn segment.
Which really tries to
hammer that in, and I fucking hate it. All right, so
well, regardless, the idea here is that Ridley Scott fell in love with the idea that Deckard might be a replicant.
Yeah,
this is actually, to be honest, is sort of set up throughout the movie. At one point, Rachel asks Deckard, "Have you ever taken that test before?"
Yes.
And yeah, and honestly, I can buy it in some cases, but I like the ambiguity. I'm generally a fan of that sort of ambiguity in film where you can kind of take the information that's been given to you and make a choice. It doesn't tell you one way or the other, but it definitely gives you the director's cut and final cut definitely take a step further to where you should believe he's a replicant rather than not.
Right. So a couple of things to contextualize this concept. The original novel has a moment in which Deckard is picked up by a cop who claims, "I've never heard of you and your identification is not valid." And Deckard's like, "Well, I've never heard of you, and I don't know who you are, but I'll cooperate because I'm a good cop or whatever." And he gets taken to a police station that he has never heard of or never seen. And they tell him there that you don't have the memories that you say you do, which gives him the doubt that he's even a real boy. And he plugs himself up to the Voight comp machine to determine that, yeah, they're just fucking with me. I'm human.
Right.
So I think that they're trying to borrow that idea and try to play it out. I think they do it better in 2049.
Well, here's my problem with that idea in the context of the original. He gets his ass kicked by every single replicant in that movie.
Right.
He has no strength.
No.
He is outmatched.
But is he a previous version?
Maybe.
Because that's where you could say,
but he's a version that doesn't know what he is, which makes you think that.
Well, they do mirror that though. Later, Kay gets his ass handed to him constantly. He gets it handed to him by Dave Bautista.
Yeah, but he always ends up on top physically. Yes. If you think about Harrison Ford, he gets his ass handed to him. By Leon and gets bailed out by
Rachel. By shooting his fucking eyeballs out. He gets his
ass handed to him by Zora.
And Zora.
And the only reason that she doesn't kill him is because the people start walking into her dressing room and she runs. Right? And then he just chases her and shoots her in the back.
Right. And then Pris, only reason why she doesn't, because she does her acrobatics.
Right. And he just grabs the gun.
He just grabs the gun and shoots her.
But he's getting his ass kicked by her.
Without his gun, he's fine.
And Roy Batty could have killed him and he saved his life.
Because he wants to be human.
Right.
Because he has empathy.
So he has no fucking super strength.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
He survives Blade Runner by pure luck, by allies, and by mercy.
Yes. Well, and you could say that he kills Pris by his wits, by being able to see his gun, roll over to him, shoot her when she can't take it away from him again. So wits do play into it a little bit. I disdain the idea of him being a replicant just because you can't just pull that one over on us 10 years later.
Sure.
And the screenwriters didn't intend on that. Ridley Scott, cool your jets, buddy.
I think he got an idea in his head that he thought was interesting.
Here's the idea that I think Ridley Scott has had in his head for the last 25 years, that he's a better filmmaker than he is. Because most of his movies now deal with complex scenarios, and most of them fall flat on their fucking faces.
I think you're probably right about that.
He's made some really good movies.
I mean, here's the thing. He's made two of my favorite movies of all time. Of all time. In Alien and Blade Runner. Like, he will forever be in my graces. But you're right. You're right.
I mean, because a lot of people would argue that James Cameron did Alien better with Aliens.
I find Aliens more watchable than Alien.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say that Denis Villeneuve did better with Blade Runner than Ridley Scott.
I think that Denis Villeneuve had the advantage of hindsight.
True. We talked about hindsight recently.
Yes. I think he had advantage of hindsight, but he, I think, understood what people connect to in Blade Runner and took that in interesting directions.
Yes. One of the things
and what I love about the new Blade Runner in relation to that is he did not make any definitive decisions on Harrison Ford's genealogy.
Right, which...
He allowed the ambiguity to exist.
Right,
which is, I think, really, really great.
When Kay goes to talk to Geoff in the retirement home, he's still making his little origami.
Yeah, yes.
And
why would you stop?
Yeah, why would you stop? And he says, he's talking about Deckard, that Deckard, he says two things. He says he wasn't long for this world, which should... if you think he's a replicant, should say, aha, gotcha.
Right.
And then, but Kay's like, well, what do you mean by that? And he says, well, there was something in his eye, which doubles down for those people who want to believe it.
The red, like they always shot replicants in the original with a little bit of red in their eye.
Yep. And, however, for those people who don't believe it, you just say, well, yeah, he was a loose cannon. And in the end, he was a loose cannon.
Absolutely.
Because the reason why he's brought back into the fold by his cop boss, because he was a risk taker.
Right.
Gaff was not.
No.
Gaff was just a yes man, really.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he can view him as being, he'll get himself killed. He's not long for this world,
right.
Or there's something in his eye because he's crazy, or whatever. So they do try to kind of, but when you start talking more and more about miracles, it seems less likely that the miracle would happen from two replicants.
Agreed.
It would take a human element and the replicant element to create the perfect combination.
But to quote Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, there are ways that you can argue both.
Dr. Malcolm.
Well, but he's in a different series of books.
But that's the thing. That's the thing, though. I mean, it can go either way, right?
It can go either way.
It doesn't matter. It's a miracle either way.
It doesn't matter. In the end, what matters
most... Which is the genius of the concept, is that it doesn't have to make a choice.
Right. And certainly you can say that because it's kind of obvious that Kay doesn't have an expiration date until he's retired, ultimately.
Right.
And he's retired by one of his own.
Yeah.
By his fucking knockdown, drag out fight with Love.
Yeah.
That's a fucking awesome scene. With the water coming in. And
it is. That scene is a little unsettling for me as well.
Well, it's real unsettling for me because I can't swim and I get freaked out.
Well, it's also the fact that Deckard isn't really reacting.
He's trying to save himself, but he can't.
Well, it's strange because he says after the fact that Kay should have just let him die.
Yeah.
Right?
He's tired.
And you kind of get a feel for that when you watch him sort of struggling. He's struggling out of instinct.
Yes.
But yet he's not yelling for help. He's not screaming. He's very solemn in his face.
You have to keep watching him kind of struggle or not struggle in the background while Kay is drowning.
It's
Love.
Super unsettling.
Yeah.
It is watching Harrison Ford in that scene because you can see that there are choices being made. He is not reacting the way you would expect someone in that situation to react, but because I think he wants to die.
Yeah, I think he's done. I think he realizes he doesn't want this. He doesn't want life anymore, which is probably, you could say, anti-replicant.
Yeah. Yeah, you could.
But anyway, yeah, it can go either. And you could argue that as a replicant, he's lived beyond his date, or whatever. Yeah, whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Good stuff, man.
Yeah,
it's a good movie.
Yeah,
it's a good movie.
It is. And of course,
this is sci-fi done right.
It is. It is really good, and it's fun to talk about it with you, Geoff, because it really kind of brings out a lot of what I love about it and amplifies it for me. And I next time I watch it, I'll watch it with new insight, right? And
thinking of me watching it on WGN one night.
Yeah, it's
when I was a little kid.
Yeah, just good stuff. And I don't think we could have possibly hoped for Blade Runner 2049 to be this good.
Yeah, it does. You do not again, much like 2018 Halloween, you don't have to like it more than the original. It's not trying to tell you it's a better movie than the original or doing things better than the original. It's up to you to say whatever you want, but I just think of it as just one big 5-hour movie.
Yeah, I mean, and it works in that context. It really does.
It does, and the care that was put in to recreate it is glorious.
Roger Deakins got his
finally got his Oscar.
Finally got his Oscar, and it's well deserved.
Yeah,
like I watched it through that lens last night, and I was like, God damn it! Yep, thank goodness you finally got it.
The other thing. There are little things also in some of the art direction and so forth. Like when Kay goes to Las Vegas to find Harrison Ford, one thing that you would not typically notice or typically would even think to include in the design, like he walks through the legs of the big giant statue lady.
Yeah.
And it looks like her shoes are a separate piece. You wouldn't think of that kind of detail until it's there.
Yeah.
And it's like, that looks like just a giant lady. It's like it looks like the shoes are a separate part of that statue.
I
Which,
love
you don't see that in mannequins necessarily. You don't see that necessarily in unless they are actually putting different items.
I just love the fact that it doesn't hit you over the head with the fact that he's going to Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's just a fucking constant sandstorm.
You kind of put it together.
He's in
Vegas. Cool.
Yeah, some of the establishing shots of Vegas almost look more like Atlanta.
Yeah.
Because the first thing I thought of was, that was like when Rick went into Atlanta to try to find his wife on the first episode of Walking Dead. Because it's like that big road that just it's like the road by itself leading into a cityscape.
Yeah.
You're right. It does not. The Vegas stuff is there, like the Elvis impersonator.
Yeah, absolutely.
The showroom and stuff, but it's dead, and it's anti-Vegas.
Well, it feels haunted.
Yeah,
right. I mean, the holograms of Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley feel like
Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, they feel like they're haunting this place.
And Deckard even he was like, this place was someplace. It was something else.
Yeah.
It's cool. Again,
it is
the little things.
The little things.
Filmmakers, little things that make the whole better. So
indeed.
So next week we're going to start getting into the Christmas spirit.
Oh shit!
It's gonna be Merry Critters, Miss.
Merry Critters, Miss.
We're going to talk about all 4 Critters movies. Talk about taking a left turn from fucking sci-fi.
Count them: 1, 2, 3, 4 Critters movies.
4 Critters movies.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So that starts next week with Critters 2. No, it's just, we're starting with Critters 1. We're doing them out of order. We're going to watch Critters.
Each week of December, you get us talking about a different Critters movie. I mean, what's a better Christmas present than that?
Gremlins.
Yeah.
but that's
maybe
beside the point.
Maybe. We'll see what happens there.
Maybe.
We'll tease a little bit of that.
Maybe Gremlins. Anyway, so we're going to talk about Critters. We're going to go through the entire Critters saga.
Yeah.
Much like we just did the Blade Runner saga.
Very much a saga. There are lots of ins and outs, complex themes,
ups and downs.
Yeah, it is. It is the launching point for many careers and the dying point of many careers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So check back next week for that. You can always catch new episodes on filmseizure.com on Wednesday mornings. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even Tumblr. And
YouTube. We
have
on YouTube.
Yep. We have the YouTubes. We've started posting things over there just to kind of give people another option.
Yeah.
Why not?
You like YouTube.
Yeah.
You're there almost every day, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you probably are, because I am.
Yep.
So subscribe to us there. Follow our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's at Film Seizure. You can also find some of my musings over at bmovieanima.com.
Indeed.
So you can check that out as well. But let's start getting in the holiday spirit.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So next week, join us for Merry Crittersmas Part the First. Critters.
You'll love it. Critters.
I like the one that goes, fuck. Anyway. But anyway, until then, I am Geoff Arbuckle.
I am Jason Oliver, and you have been listening to Film Seizure.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears.